Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about Lochlea Sowing Edition, the first crop, as they put it on the label. Not sure if you're going to see that because it's in quite small writing, but this is a brand new release from Lochlea, a limited edition run that they are going to do. That basically there's eventually there will be four seasonal releases that tie in with the farming year, because Lochlea is a working distillery. So the first one, because this was released today, in fact, so 21st of March, and March is the time for sowing the crops. I'll go into what the other ones are going to be in the little bit of blurb, but this is the day that it's released. I have opened a bottle because the rest of this I'm going to be using on basically a selection box of some new things that have come out recently, some of which are incredibly hard to get hold of. As this is, I got very few bottles and it's not even got on the shelf. I'm already oversubscribed, so I've already sold out. So if you're watching this hoping that I might be able to turn around at the end and say, oh, you can buy a bottle from me, you can't. I needed about 10 times the amount of stock that I did receive to satisfy all the demand that I did get. But I also have remaining a bit of leftover of the inaugural first release as well. So what we'll be able to do is a side-by-side tasting of the two to see how this compares with the first release. But before we get into that, let me give you some background information about Lochlea Distillery itself. The Lochlea Distillery is a conversion of the farm buildings at Lochlea Farm, situated 8 miles south of Kilmarnock, and at which the world-famous Scottish writer and poet Robert Burns lived and worked from 1777 to 1784. Plans for a distillery by the current owner Neil McGeoch were approved in 2014, and whisky production commenced in August 2018. Malcolm Rennie, who'd previously been distillery manager at the likes of Bruichladdich, Ardbeg, Kilchoman and Annandale, initially worked with Neil as a consultant before coming on board full-time to oversee the birth of the whisky. However, he then left to join the rebirth of the Rosebank distillery in October 2021 and was replaced by John Campbell, who had previously been the distillery manager at Laphroaig for 16 years. The distillery is another new whisky venture who are producing a grain-to-glass spirit. They grow their own barley in fields literally over the road and have their own water source. The bottle itself features embossing referencing the tyre tracks that surround the farm as well. Lochlea Sowing Edition is the first of a series of 4 seasonal editions that are named after what is happening on the farm during that period. This year will see Sowing, followed by Harvest and Fallow editions, but the final Ploughing edition isn't due to be released until winter 2023. The First Crop Sowing Edition is 100% matured in first filled bourbon barrels and is bottled at a slightly higher ABV than the first release at 48% as opposed to 46%. As before, there is no chill filtration or colour added. Okay, so let's get pouring. So I'm going to do a side-by-side. So I don't want too much of this because I need to put the rest of it in a number of boxes, and we will also do the first release as well. Now straight away, and you might even be able to just see the difference between the two just with them sat on the shelf side by side. Just make sure I get the right hand. So we'll put the first release in my right hand and the Sowing Edition in my left. Try not to drop them. Okay, so straight away there is a colour difference between the two. So with the first release, we have this combination of first fill bourbon casks and first fill Pedro Ximenez sherry casks, whereas the Sowing Edition is just first fill bourbon and that's it. But what I'm assuming is we have slightly older spirit in the Sowing Edition than we did in the first release. So what I'm going to do actually is I think I'm going to do the first release first, because my suspicion is going to be that the first release with that Pedro Ximenez element is going to be richer and sweeter, and we'll find a lighter texture, but potentially with that, obviously with it being first fill bourbon, more of a kind of vanilla, maybe citrusy note, whereas this is going to be a little bit darker and richer. So the first release is biscuity. There's a touch of kind of hay in there, like dry hay, but there is a bit of fruitiness. And I remember when I did the review video for the first release, was when I first tried it, it wasn't that it was tight, but it took a few minutes in the glass to really open up, and the fruitiness did come through. So we might have the same situation here, but there is definitely a fruitiness in there, but it's more kind of sultanas rather than dark fruits. Right, now onto the Sowing Edition. Instantly lighter, much more of a citrus note in there. There is a little bit of a creaminess, but it's definitely like a lemon peel, lemon oil almost. Not quite limey. I remember talking about the first release and talking about getting like a lime note, and this is more of a lemon peel, lemon zest. Again, there's the biscuity note that's on the first release, but this is certainly lighter, much more, and it's very apt for the time of year, much more spring-like, very zingy and fresh, and yeah, there's a real kind of lemon cream feel to this as well. There is a slightly buttery note, kind of like slightly salted butter almost. Slightly salted butter on brioche bread, but not that's been toasted, actual kind of slightly sweet brioche bread, but fresh bread, not a toasted brioche. Very inviting though, but very fresh, very, very spring-like. Okay, so I'm gonna have the sowing first to taste, then the first release. The citrusiness is there to start with, but you do then get a burst of oak. There is quite a pronounced oakiness on there, but it's not dry. It works well with that citrusy feel. It's a very bright, light oak flavour. Citrus peel, creaminess, not so much. Now, I'm filming this on a Monday when the shop's closed, and I normally have some kind of heating on because the shop gets pretty cold during the day. So I normally have heating on through the day when I'm working in the shop when it's open. But when it's off, the heating's not on. And it's actually a relatively chilly day today. So the two whiskies are a little bit chilled. You know, I put them slightly above room temperature. And I do wonder if that's just masking a little bit more of the depth that's in there. But it's light, it's zingy. I'm surprised with that kind of bite of oak that's in there though. I wasn't really expecting that. It's weird, it's not obviously bourbon. There's not quite as much like vanilla notes as I thought there was going to be, but there is still a kind of creaminess there, but it's not as pronounced. There's more of an oakiness coming through. It offers its youthful nature. It's sprightly, it's zingy, it's almost effervescent. Very, very pleasant indeed. Now, let's compare it to the first release. The youthfulness is there, but it's tempered slightly with that sweetness. And that PX element becomes more pronounced, particularly when you try it against the sowing. The fruitiness is definitely there. But what there is on both is a character, and I mentioned it when I was nosing the first release, and I'm sure I mentioned it when I first reviewed first release, is there's kind of a hay feel, but it's hay in fields. It's not a farmyardy, because farmyard, to me, if I say it's a farmyardy smell, it's more that slightly kind of vegetal, slightly, you know, manure-y, but not in an unpleasant way. Both of these remind me of fields of hay, fields of straw, that kind of nose that you have when you're walking past fields that have got kind of fully grown grain, but they've not been harvested yet, but it's a warm day and you can kind of smell it in the air. That kind of slightly dried in the sun hay and straw that's kind of, you know, that kind of weird sort of, not sharp, but there's, you know, a grainy nose that's in the air. And it's on these two. And it feels like Lochlea is already starting to get a character of its own, which is very impressive so early on. But I think it's quite important for distilleries to find. They need to find some kind of character, some kind of identity that will make them stand out. And if Lochlea is going to be a farm-based whiskey that is going to be light, crisp, clean, slightly effervescent, but has that kind of grain, straw, hay character running through all of them, I think they're onto a winner. As I think I said with the first release, because I haven't watched it recently, this is not going to be for people that want sherry bombs, that want big, rich, full, fruity whiskies, lots of flavour, lots of complexity. There is complexity going on here, but they are very light. This is light and delicate and spring-like. And I'd be really intrigued I'd love to see what a first fill PX cask, nothing else is, but I'd be surprised if they do something like that. I don't know what the constituent parts are going to be for the other releases, the Ploughing, the Farrow, etc. I don't know whether they're all going to be first fill bourbon, or whether it's going to be first fill bourbon and something else in a finish, or, I mean, there might be a first fill PX, which would be, I'd love to see that. I don't know what those are going to be. And what we do have is the R barley that's coming, I think it's June, July, which is going to be essentially their core expression. So the sowing is, as I sort of expected it to be when I saw it was just first fill bourbon. It's lighter, it's zingier, it's more citrusy than I was expecting. It's not quite as obviously bourbon-y. It doesn't have the vanilla creaminess that I was expecting it to have. But it doesn't have that fruity character, the kind of sultana fruits that the first release does, because it doesn't have that PX element. But it definitely brings out more of the sort of hay, straw, grassy character that seems to be already a thread that's going to run through this distillery. And now that it's warmed up a little bit, now I'm starting to get warmer citrus notes. Now it's starting to turn into like a lemon cream, almost like that lemon puff biscuit. It's so spring-like. It's so apt for this time of year. You know, it's really well done. So the, oh God, which one is it? Is it the Ploughing, which is the one that's supposed to be winter 2023? That's the last one that we'll come across. I'd be really intrigued as to whether the other three of the four seasonal emulate the particular times of year. So whether the summer, essentially summer, autumn, winter, whether we'll start to see them kind of, they get progressively richer, kind of darker in feel, not necessarily in color or flavor profile, but you know, they feel warmer, they feel more rounded as we go through summer. That's quite light still, that maybe like a touch more richness to that, but then as we get to autumn and winter, they start to become deeper and richer and more warming than the spring would be. I'm really intrigued to see kind of where they take this flavor profile, whether they actually consciously tie in what they are doing as a flavour profile of the whiskey to tie in with the time of year when it's being released. But for a spring whiskey that is essentially evoking the sowing of seeds in bright, kind of crisp, not that warm, but we are starting to kind of get warmer. The sun is out. It's not necessarily warm, but it's, you know, as we always say in the UK, when the sun's out at this time of year, it's warm in the sun, but it's chilly in the shade, isn't it? Oh yes, absolutely. Because that's all we do is talk about the weather. It really does kind of, it fits the bill absolutely for that. Do I prefer it to the first release? I don't know. I think my personal choice is probably the first release, but basically because I'm a sucker for anything that's got some kind of Pedro Ximenez finish influence in it. I think I slightly prefer the slightly fruitier element of the first release. The sowing, it just doesn't have that extra bit of fruitiness because of the nature of the cask, but it's still an absolute cracker. It's still, I love that citrus cream element that's in there, and it's very much not quite lime, it's more lemon. It's very much like lemon zest, lemon oil, whipped in cream, with a slightly biscuity note as well. This is the end of the first release. I think I do prefer this. Personally, I just prefer that slightly warmer fruit element in there. But what I am hoping to do as well is I'm going to try and keep one of each aside until all the others come out. Maybe not until winter 2023 though. I might have to bite the bullet and get to the end of this year when the R barley is out and the other two seasonal editions have gone, and maybe do some kind of tasting event or tasting pack or something where we have 5, because I can't hold on until winter 2023, and I've literally got 1 bottle of each of these left, and that's it, to be put aside so that we can see some kind of, hopefully, progression as these new releases come out. But really like it. Unfortunately, as I was saying earlier, I am completely sold out. It's not even gone on the shelf. If you are interested in any of these kind of limited editions that I do get in, get onto our mailing list, my mailing list, because it's just me. At the weekend, because I completely forgot that this was due out today. I actually thought it was a little bit, I completely misread the email, and I thought it was out on Thursday, not today. So I didn't email my mailing list until Saturday to say, if you're interested in a bottle, let me know, because I'm going to have to run a ballot. And as I say, I needed at least 10 times the amount of stock that I received in order to basically give everybody that's expressed an interest a bottle. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to send an email to quite a lot of people this afternoon to say, I'm really sorry, but unfortunately you weren't successful in the ballot, and then email not a lot of people to say, congratulations, you've got a bottle. But you've got to be in it to win it. So if you would be interested in any future limited releases that I get my hands on, and you're not on the mailing list, I highly recommend it. If you're outside of the UK, get on the mailing list because you'll hear from me, but I'm not going to be able to ship outside of the UK at the moment. So that's not the sowing edition, that's the sowing edition. But another really, really impressive bottling from Lochlea. I really like what they're doing, I like what they're standing for, and this is, as with the first release, a really good advert for where it looks like this distillery is going to be as a sort of as a style and an identity of its own. So yes, really good stuff. If you can get your hands on the bottle, I highly recommend it. If you like light, fresh, zingy whiskies, absolutely. As I said, if you like deep, dark, proper whiskies, you're a proper whiskey drinker, blah, 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 it's probably not for you. It's probably too light and frilly, or however you want to describe it. But there is lots going on there. There's bags of character, and it's, again, really, really impressive stuff. So that's the Lochlea Sowing Edition. I shall see you in the next video. Cheers.